Okay, guys, so I have your global feedback view here. Overall, really good attempts, really good use of the verbs that we looked at. So here are the actual verbs, and with regard to meaning, they were all used correctly, they were used accurately, but the problems that arose were more grammatical. So this is, in a way, is good because we focused on vocabulary in yesterday's lesson, so we had our list of verbs, and today we're focusing more on the grammar side of how to use them accurately. So just like we were saying before, we are focusing on both vocab and grammar. So what I've done is, rather than comment underneath each of your answers, it's more beneficial to go through them with you on the screen here today, and I'm just going to correct them in front of you. So I've taken 10, this is the first one. So rather than just say to you every time that I want you to pause the video and try to correct it yourself first, I'm just going to take it as a given that when you see the sentence, we have 10 of them. When you see it, you know you should pause the video, try to correct it yourself, or try to establish what was wrong with it, and then press play when you're ready, and then I will just make the corrections and explain why it's wrong. So I'm not going to tell you to pause and play throughout the video. You just do it yourself. When we move to a new sentence, you pause it, see if you can correct it yourself first, and then have a look at what I did with it. Okay, so this is the first one here. From 2008 onwards, it has increased gradually to around £3.5 million. Okay, so the problem here was that the person needs to focus on 2018, so the person was trying to explain what happened between 2008 and this year. So really what that should be is since 2008, there. So it's just more clear that the year we're referring to now is 2018, because since 2018 it has increased gradually to £3.5 million, and that is the figure for this year. So that's very often when we're using present perfect, we're going to need to use the word since to refer to all the time from 2008 until now. Okay, next one here. The sum of money used up on sports in England started from 4.3 million. So we'll just correct that bit first. So the sum of money used, now used up is, the phrasal verb used up means kind of we use all the money we have. Not how much money we used, but basically we now have no more money left. I used up all my money on sports equipment. Means I now have no more money. So it's just the sum of money used on sports in England started at. So from is when you're going, like it increased from 4.2 to whatever it is, but it started at. So this is just the one point is at, whereas from is when we're going to describe from here to there. But just one figure started at, because that's the preposition we need for the single figure where it started from. So it started at £4.2 million in 1998, which decreased up. So obviously the decrease is down. So which decreased to £2.7 million after 10 years before it steadily increased. So this is still in the past, and reached. Now we don't say reached to a figure because this is implied reached. So it would be increased to, but reached and then just the figure. So reached the figure of £3.7 million. Okay, so let's move on to the next one here. From 1998 to 2008, the amount of money expenditure on sport in Scotland increased dramatically. So the amount of money, so it would either be the amount of money spent on sport. Expenditure is not a verb. Expenditure is a noun. So the expenditure on sport in Scotland increased dramatically. Now nearly by is in the wrong order, so we're going to have by nearly 2 million. Now that doesn't make sense when. So if it increased dramatically by 2 million, then we can't say when, because you've already said what happened in that period. So you'll be after which, to refer to after this year 2008 we've already mentioned. So after which it has plummeted from 4.2 to just under 2 million over. So that doesn't make sense still. The expenditure sport in Scotland increased dramatically by 2 million. After which it plummeted from. So it can't plummet from 4.2. Excuse me. So increased dramatically by this much. Okay, so it went up by that much, and then that was up to 4.2. That makes sense. After which it plummeted from 4.2 to just under 2 million over 10 years period. Over the next 10-year period. So as part of a noun phrase, whenever you say like the length of time as a part of a noun phrase, you need the hyphen here. So over the next 10-year period. Now I'm using the word next because we've already spoken about the first 10-year period, and now we're talking about the next 10-year period, which is going to be from 2008 to 2018. Okay. So has plummeted. Okay, so that's fine. Next one then. In England, it shows that the total cost spent on sport declined from just below 4.3 million to approximately 6.2 million. Okay, so it in this context wouldn't be clear because you're kind of referring to England. So in England, it shows being the chart. So let's say, for example, the chart shows. But let's say the person used it because they'd already referenced the chart in the previous sentence. That would be fine. But in England, the chart shows. So now in England is referring to where the chart is, not where the information is referring to. So it would have to be the chart shows that in England, the total cost spent on sport, the total cost. So the cost is like the price you're paying. So it's not the total cost spent. It's the total price, the total amount of money spent, or the total costs for sport. Okay, so again, in that context, it doesn't work. So the total costs for sport declined from just below 4.3 million to approximately 2.6 million from the year 1998 to 2008 respectively. Now, respectively doesn't work in this context. Respectively is normally when you would quote the figures for England in 1998 and Scotland in 1998. So then it doesn't really work this way because you've already said the sport declined from here to here. So it's not going to, the decline implies that the higher number was the earlier year and the lower number is the later year. So it would just be declined from, to be honest, like the most logical way to do this would be from just below 4.3 million in 1998 to approximately 2.6 million in 2008. And that there would be the most logical way of kind of laying out that information. Because when you put the years at the end, we have to jump back to the figures again. Whereas this way, it's very logical that the reader can follow exactly the information relating to the year as it's read. So that's just the easiest way to lay that one out. Okay, the next one here. The amount of money spent on sport in England went down from approximately £4.3 million to roughly £2.5 million. Okay, so that actually grammatically is perfect. And the thing I wanted to highlight here isn't actually a mistake according to IELTS. So if you write this in the IELTS test, they're not going to penalise you, but I think it's worth mentioning because just in like conventional English punctuation, how we would write numbers is like that. So we would use the commas here as 2,500,000. So we would use commas like that. But when we want to refer to it with the word million, it would be 2.5 million like that. So just be aware the commas are used when we're writing the full number, and the full stop is used when we're using the word to fill in for all the zeros. But grammatically, that one was spot on, and actually that mistake wouldn't be, as I said, that mistake wouldn't lose you any marks in the IELTS test because they don't really refer to that as a mistake. But just because you're going to an English-speaking country, that is how we would always do it. Okay, next one then. England's total spending on sports dropped significantly from around £4.2 million to roughly £2.5 million in a decade starting from 1998. Now, this is a misunderstanding of the word decade. We refer to a decade. A decade means 10 years, but it's not just 10 years starting at any time. A decade will always be 1990 to 1999. Oh, excuse me. 1990 to 1999. So that is a decade. But you cannot start a decade in the middle. So like to say this to this, 1998 to 2008, we don't refer to that as a decade. We refer to the start of the decade being 1990 or 2000 or 2010, like that. So referring to like a tidy 90 to 99 is the decade. So in this context, it's not a decade. So England's total spending on sports dropped significantly from around £4.2 million to roughly £2.5 million in the 10 years. The first 10 years, starting from 1998. Now, the reason I'm saying the first 10 years is because that was the first 10 years shown in the chart. Whereas you could just say in the 10 years starting from 1998 would also be correct, but the word first refers back to the years covered in the chart. Okay, next one. From 2008, the expenditure has dropped just below £2 million. So the expenditure has dropped to just below £2 million. Okay, next one then. However, from that year onwards, it has increased significantly, and it is expected to rise to around £4.5 million in 2028. Okay, so this isn't a grammar mistake. This is more, this is back to like the content and the content that you should include in your essay. I know this wasn't the task, but I just couldn't help myself pointing this one out. So basically, you got a year in the past, you got the current year, and you got a year in the future. It would be very unusual not to include a figure for this year. So this video was made in 2018. That means it would be unusual not to give the figure to. It has increased significantly to whatever the figure is, X million pounds. And is expected to rise to around £4.5 million in 2028. So there, grammatically, that was correct, but it would just be a bad decision not to include the figure for this year because that will always be a key feature. Next one then, the Wales and England's. So we don't use an article with Wales, whereas you would with the UK. So Wales and England's spending has doubled. Now in 2018, so that would mean that all of the increase happened in that 1 year. But what happened was it increased between the first year and the year being stated as now. So we can't say in 2018. We have to say by. So it's like it happened in the period stated in the past until now. So within those years, not that it all happened in 2018. So it happened in the years previously leading up to 2018. So Wales and England's spending has doubled by 2018 and reached up to 4 million by overtaking Scotland. Now, reached up to is an approximation, so it's not exact. So again, we don't use the preposition, so let's just make it grammatically correct first and then talk about the other mistakes. So, and reach 4 million by overtaking Scotland. And there shouldn't be a space between the last word and the full stop, so the full stop comes immediately there. So here the implication is the reason it is that England and Wales are 4 million is that they overtook Scotland, but that isn't the reason. So it has doubled by 2018 and reached 4 million to overtake Scotland. Okay, the other issue here is that the word doubled is far too precise. So doubled means like multiply by 2, so times 2, that's doubled. So unless it is exactly that figure, that is inaccurate. So you need to use some kind of an approximation to make that correct. Wales and England's spending has roughly or approximately doubled. But again, in this context, we're talking about their spending together, but the chart has shown them independently. So Wales and England's spending have both roughly doubled by 2018 and reached approximately 4 million to overtake Scotland. I can't remember the chart off the top of my head, so I don't know if these figures are accurate, but at least it's grammatically accurate, and I can imagine what this would look like now. Okay, so on to the last one then. So first let's just tidy up the punctuation. So first letter of the word gets a capital, first word of a proper noun, first letter of a proper noun gets a capital. We always need a space after full stop or comma. Okay, so now let's look at the actual language. In Wales, total cost of expend. So again, that's just the vocabulary is used incorrectly. So it's a definite noun, so we're going to have the total cost of sport remain stable from 1998 to 2008. Yeah, so the total costs of sport. The total cost of sport, excuse me, let me just think about that. The total cost of sport. Yeah, I think that's grammatically accurate, but it's not a great way to describe what you're explaining. So it'd be the total expenditure. Okay, so let's just say that was grammatically correct, but not a natural or a strong way to describe what was happening. So in Wales, the total expenditure on sport remained stable from 1998 to 2008. And again, in this, you would want to at least say roughly what the figure was between 1998 and 2008. So you could either give a range, so it remains stable between here and here, or it remains stable at roughly, and just give a figure like the kind of the average or somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be completely accurate. Yeah, so that's pretty much all the corrections that I wanted to look at. Like I said, the actual use of the verbs was all accurate, but it's more to do with the grammatical structures and like what should come before and what should come after the verbs. So anything that you were unaware of before today's lesson, you should have a note in your notebook wherever you record your vocabulary. Use example sentences so that you can learn them in context, and just make sure that you're not just passively watching this video, but that you're actively learning. And now you need to go and use this language, produce it yourself, and make mistakes with it until you can use it accurately. So don't just watch the video and feel that you have learned something. You need to go and actually use it after this. So that's it. As always, if you have any questions, just put them in the comments underneath this video, and I'll be back to you with any answers you need later on. Thank you, and have a good week.